The audio excerpts you will hear are not of ETHS at the taping, but from a doily cart CD. The Mikado turns 50. Remember? In 1962, the hot thing in music across the country was still the twist, as popularized by Chubby Checker and Joey D of the Peppermint Lounge. But not at ETHS, where the hot thing in music, at least in the arts wing, was a 77-year-old operetta by two Victorian gentlemen named Gilbert and Sullivan. After 2 years of musical plays by Rodgers and Hammerstein, the most recent based on a book by ETHS alum Margaret Landon, producer Sadie Rafferty and director Malcolm Mosing made a radical departure by choosing the Mikado for the annual musical in 1962. Why? The new auditorium. Miss Rafferty told the Evanston Review that ETHS had presented Gilbert and Sullivan in the past, but she wanted to wait for the next time until the school had improved facilities. Quote, "Now with our remodeled and enlarged auditorium, we are ready to do the Mikado again. This time, it will really be a spectacular." She said the entire stage and the side stages in the auditorium will make up a giant set depicting the town of Tittypool. With the stage dressed by Bob Proper's spectacular set and the cast dressed in original costumes. Quote, "All of the costumes for the production had been originally designed by Frank Precis, chairman of the high school art department. It was now up to us." Both the Friday and Saturday night performances were sold out, so a Thursday night preview was added, in which both sets of leads participated.
If you want to know who we are gentlemen of Japan. On many a thousand car, on many a street and fire.
And that thwap leads us right into our first reminiscence by a male chorus member. I really got upset with our fans, not the groupies who sat in the front row of the auditorium during rehearsal. The fans, we in the chorus, were constantly waving, pointing, and pruning. I must have spent over 1,000 hours trying to break in those miserable bamboo-colored pleated paper fans. They were supposed to open with a quick snap of the wrist and then neatly refold in repose with another snap. My fans were always sticking. I tried to break them in like baseball mitts, but I could never get the hang of it. All that fitting and thwapping and little to show for it. When the fan was finally broken in after a couple of million flicks, it would fall to pieces. Time for a new fan and a repetition of the process. I attribute most of my wrist issues in later life to those fan experiences. By the way, the leads got the really beautiful, well-oiled fans, and thus never had to experience what those of us in the chorus suffered through. Roger Dews. One lead's memories were as beautiful as her fan. After college, when I was first married, I was the music, dance, and drama teacher at a Sacred Heart High School, and I put on many productions with my students. I pretended in my mind's eye to be a combination of Miss Rafferty, Miss Keith, Mr. Didden, and Mr. Soul, all combined into one. They all had such a profound impact on my life, and I hope that as a young teacher, I had a fraction of that same positive impact on my students. Lynn Williams Twist. Another lead had a rather different and very specific memory about a faculty member.
Witness my distress, here's a pretty mess, here's a pretty mess.
I was Nanky Poo, and the first time I rehearsed with the entire orchestra, Mr. Werner asked me, "Don't you ever take a shower?" I think he had been working for weeks to get the orchestra ready, and he was on stage to direct the choir and orchestra together and found I was totally unprepared. I think he meant to imply that I should be practicing by singing in the shower, but for a 17-year-old standing in front of my best friends, it was pretty humiliating. He was probably just so flustered he couldn't think of anything else to say. He got his point across. The result was I went home and learned the part and still know it. Shel Givens. For another lead, the Mikado was a welcome anchor.
From every kind of man obedience I expect. I'm the Emperor of Japan.
I grew up in New York City, went to high school there. My father passed away in March of 1959 when I was a 9th grader. My mother remarried in August 1961, and we all moved right away to the northern suburb of Evanston, where I was enrolled at ETHS. As you might imagine, coming to a new high school as a senior, I had trouble making friends and was learning to deal with the complexities of a blended family. I cannot recall anything about my decision to try out for the school play, but enjoyed the camaraderie and the pleasure of being a part of something. I enjoyed the rehearsals, the friendship of fellow students who made and painted the sets, the cast and chorus alike. My daughter Amanda knew how much the experience meant to me. Though we live far from Chicago, as a 2010 Christmas gift, she treated my wife Barbara and me to a Chicago lyric opera production of The Mikado. Stu Spindell.
I'm his daughter elect.
The one lasting memory I have of The Mikado is the difficulty the makeup artists, and they were true artists, had when asked to make sure my dimples didn't show. Because after all, Caddishaw certainly didn't have dimples, and it's hard to look angry and sullen with dimples. They tried everything, but if you look at the pictures, it's clear it didn't work. Alice Hazelden Lane. And speaking of makeup, I was just on the makeup crew, but I attended every rehearsal I could, listened with great intent, and soaked up the music like a sponge. I can still sing most of the songs and even remember the orchestration. Kathy Dalgetty Meals.
The threatened cloud has passed away.
There shines the dawning day.
What more the night may come too soon.
Years and years of afternoon.
I was painting this very piece for the set when Wayne came up to me. He was the sound technician for the Mikado. He introduced himself and asked me to go to the basketball game that Friday night. We dated 7 years before getting married and just celebrated the 50th anniversary of our first meeting. Barbara Smith Lass. I was the choreographic assistant to Mr. Mosing, who lived across the street. He got me the original Doily Cart Company notes for movements to all the songs. He would tell me what he planned to work on the next day, and I'd work on the choreography with the Doily Cart notes that night. Pam Mullack. The audiences loved the show that March weekend. They even gave each performance a standing ovation, not commonplace then like it is these days. The Evanston Review raved. In the Evanstonian, Ken Kay's glowing evaluation turned out to be prescient. In fact, both casts deluded their audiences into forgetting this was a high school production. Mr. Erie couldn't have said it better. Those of us who had Carlisle Erie for homeroom or social studies knew there was no bigger ETHS booster, and that when he got enthused about something, he was a force of nature. Mr. Erie apparently sat in on rehearsals after school and couldn't stop raving about the upcoming production, even at his weekly Naval Reserve meetings, where one of the other regulars was Clark George, the station manager for the local CBS affiliate WBBM-TV. George was so intrigued that he asked one of his producers to attend a performance. When the producer's report echoed Erie's enthusiasm, Clark George did something unprecedented. In fact, ETHS Mikado chorus member Valerie Haas made some internet inquiries across the country a few years ago and could find no similar event happening anywhere afterward either. George proposed to the astonished Evanston High School administrators that the production be restaged so that WBBM-TV could film it and show it throughout Chicagoland on primetime television. Yes, 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 said ETHS. And so rehearsals began again. The leads for the taping were selected from the two casts. The blocking was tweaked to adjust for TV cameras. And then, on a stiflingly hot and rainy Friday evening in June, ETHS focused once more on the auditorium. When we went on stage for the first rehearsal for the TV production, I, of course, thought I knew quite a bit about being on stage because I had been in a number of shows. The first scene we blocked, I believe, was a short scene that started out with a dialogue between Coco and me, Nanky Poo. Not more than a few seconds into the scene, I heard, "Stop!" A TV guy scampered over to us, yanked me by the arm, and placed me about 2 feet from my counterpart. "You've got to be close or the camera won't pick both of you up. Remember that, so we don't waste any more time." Apparently, I did remember it, since that is one of my lasting memories of working on that show. Unfortunately, my opportunities to put that knowledge to use since then have been severely restricted. Bob Holst.
My optical sublime I shall achieve in time.
I was very nearsighted in high school and had to wear corrective lenses. That worked fine in rehearsals, but when it came to the performances, I was very visually impaired. It wasn't until I saw the television broadcast, in black and white of course, that I could really see the performance. Julius Erlenbach. But by the time the tape was broadcast on Tuesday, September 11th, 1962, as promoted by WBBM-TV in this publicity spiral notebook, Julius, 2 other taping leads, and all the rest of the senior members of the cast were already out of the picture, having graduated and gone on to college. But the efforts of the cast were enthusiastically applauded by Paul Malloy, the Sun-Times TV columnist. Quote, "The result was a videopus of rewarding magnitude, and I'm leaning far aback from that pretty good for a high school nonsense. There were moments, notably when the girls' chorus was in action, when the viewer felt dazzled by gusts of professionalism. Evanston High's performance was top-rate." The next paragraph was subtitled, "Caddishaw Almost Steals Show." It began, "In the Mikado, the role of Caddishaw is a meaty one. The meat, to give it a name, is ham." And Karen Johnson bit into it with relish and gusto. As the preening, aging peacock in search of a mate, the accomplished young contralto very nearly ran away with the evening. A different perspective came from the Chicago Daily News. Their TV columnist was on vacation, so the editor assigned the paper's young drama critic, Richard Christensen, to write a review. Christensen would become the dean of Chicago drama critics, and being forced to critique a high school production on TV did not put him in a generous mood. Quote, "The acting was thin, the singing was flat, the opportunities were muffed in many cases." Was he watching the same program as Paul Malloy? After all these years, I've discovered the reason for his negative review of an ETHS show. Christensen graduated from Oak Park. But the general buzz was very positive, and WBBM-TV's unusual venture was crowned the next May with 3 local Emmys, one for the program itself and, according to the Evanstonian article, one for the audio engineer and a third for the videotape editor. The Emmy recognition elicited a second Sun-Times column by our biggest booster, Paul Malloy. He reprised elements of his original review, fondly remembering the leading performers by name, as well as Mr. Werner, Mr. Mosing, and Miss Rafferty. But the main purpose of his column was to chastise WBBM-TV for not inviting any ETHS representatives to the awards dinner. He concluded, quote, "While 3 Emmys this day repose in the Channel 2 studios, one of them belongs in the lobby of Evanston Township High School." Malloy's broadside did not shame Channel 2 into coughing up an Emmy, but the station did give ETHS a plaque. Quote, WBBM-TV CBS Chicago acknowledges with deep appreciation the talents and support of the students, faculty, and administration of Evanston Township High School in making possible the broadcast on Television 2 of The Mikado, September 11, 1962. This outstanding television presentation was awarded 3 Emmys on May 13, 1963 by members of the Chicago chapter of the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. Evanston Township High School thus becomes the first high school in the United States to have a student production so honored by the Academy. Clark B. George, Vice President, CBS Television Stations Division and General Manager, WBBM-TV. The plaque hangs proudly in the hallway of the music department just outside the auditorium, but the real honor can't be put on a wall. It's in the hearts and memories of all of us who were lucky enough to be part of this extraordinary experience. What was it really like back then? What were we like back then? Pictures from our yearbook give us a clue, but maybe W.S. Gilbert, from across the ages, said it best. Hopefully, the world has turned out well for each of us. But the Mikado certainly gave us a great send-off going out into it. Ah, the memories.